Back when I was a kid, one time my parents left me home alone. I think I was about 10, and it was ruled by my parents that I was old enough to be home by myself. I'm not sure where they went looking back, but it was nighttime and they took my sister as well. So I just know that it was nighttime and I would be by myself for a few hours. I had actually been left alone maybe 2 or 3 times before prior to this, so I had some experience. Still, it was something that was very unusual to me, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit nervous. But we lived in a pretty typical neighborhood. We had neighbors at all angles, and our street was generally quiet at night, but there were many houses on it, and our house was a 2-story place with 4 bedrooms. When my parents left that night, I made sure that all the doors were locked, and then I covered all the windows. With it being nighttime, I knew that if I looked out the windows, I would just make myself scared. In the times that I had been left home alone before this, though, nothing ever happened. However, I do remember feeling scared being all by myself at night, and my parents were only going to be gone for a few hours. This was in about 2005, so I was in the living room and was just watching TV on the couch. About an hour into this, and I was feeling pretty good. That is, until I heard a random knock at the front door. This was like my biggest fear of staying home alone coming true. Somebody was at the door, and I was all by myself. Plus, it was nighttime. I did not know who was there, obviously, but I knew that it was not my parents. And we didn't have a neighbor that was always dropping by or anything, so this instantly made me scared and nervous. But I was also curious and wanted to see who was there. I carefully went over to the window in the living room, which was at the front of the house, and looked out to the front step. I thought maybe it would be one of the neighbors that I would recognize, or maybe a door-to-door salesman or something like that. But instead, I saw a guy standing at the front step dressed as a clown. I just remember that his clothes were fairly normal, but his face looked like a scary clown. I'm not sure if it was a mask or face paint and a wig, but he had green hair and a red nose and a white face. It had some other creepy features, and in the moment I saw him, I closed the curtains again right away. I was completely freaked out. I ran all the way out of the room and then upstairs to my bedroom. When I got upstairs, I remember hearing him knock on the door again. I kept going until I got to my room, then I went inside of it and hid under my covers. I couldn't hear anything from there. I tried to just ignore it all. After hiding there for maybe 10 minutes, I started to feel a little bit better. I emerged from my bedroom and listened. I didn't hear anything at all. There was no knocking and no sounds anywhere. So I decided to look outside from upstairs now. My bedroom was at the front of the house and it overlooked the front a little bit, so I might be able to see if the clown was still there. But when I moved my blinds and looked, I instantly saw the clown there. He was standing now in the middle of our front yard and was looking right up at me. Maybe he knew I was in there because my bedroom light was the only upstairs light that was on. Nevertheless, I was completely freaked out and I ran to a phone and called my parents. I told them that a scary clown was in the front yard. They said they would be home shortly. I then hid under my covers again and did not come out until my parents were home. After getting inside, my parents told me that the coast was clear and the clown was gone. Apparently he had been gone before they arrived because they never saw him. So I told my parents all about what had happened. They did not know who that could be, and nothing like that had ever happened before. And after that, nothing like it ever happened again. I still remember that night very well. It was so crazy how it was one of the first times that I was left home alone by myself. It's kind of unlucky that that's when a creepy clown comes to the door. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had answered, but I'm glad that I did not. This is something that happened during that creepy clown trend of 2016. I think it was like the fall of 2016 and there were clown sightings everywhere. You would see on the news or online creepy clowns all over the place. Many times it was teenagers or whoever jumping onto the trend and just pranking people or whatever, and it typically wasn't that big of a deal. But I have my own story from this time that I've not yet shared until now. It was late at night and I was driving home from work. I lived in an area that was a little bit quiet. The drive home went through a little more rural area that went along some farmland, woods, and some other wild land. It wasn't the middle of nowhere or anything, just much more quiet of a town. So I left work that night at nearly 11 o'clock as it was one of my later days. I started driving home, and as you would expect, almost every road was completely empty, so I was making pretty good time. At one point, I came to this stop sign. It was a 4-way stop. that could be tricky at times. It had a majority of its views of the other roads blocked by trees, because it was kind of surrounded by woods, so you had to kind of look forward to see if other cars were there on the other roads. I slowed down and then started to come to a stop and looked to make sure that nobody else was there on the other roads. As I slowed most of the way down and I was starting to come to a stop, I saw something up ahead. Coming out of the woods and onto the road were multiple clowns. They were people in full clown costumes who looked unsettling. Whoever these guys were, they did a very good job with it all. It wasn't some cheap clown costume or a mask. There were a bunch of men with legitimate clown outfits as well as fully painted faces and colored hair. Some wore hats, and it was incredibly disturbing. My car was now stopped at the stop sign, and I was looking at these clowns wondering what was going on. I quickly remembered all the clown sightings going around and all that stuff. I had seen it on the news or online or whatever, but I hadn't actually seen a clown in person yet, and I didn't think that I would. And now that I was seeing not just one, but multiple, I was real nervous. So my car was stopped, and the clowns were walking on the road and coming out of the woods about 30 or 40 feet in front of me. So basically they were walking in the middle area of the four-way stop where all the roads intersect. One by one, more would come out of the woods. Pretty soon, there were about 10 clowns walking in the road there. I could not believe it. Each one looked creepy in its own way. Then all the clowns, seemingly at once, started walking towards my car. I had just kind of been sitting there in shock and watching for maybe 10 seconds. The clowns were also walking kind of slow. But when they started to look at me and then walk in my direction, I knew that I needed to get out of there, and my instincts finally kicked in. I put the car in reverse and started backing up a little bit. Then I put it in drive and made a full U-turn on that road, and thankfully just made it around. Then I drove away. The clowns were still walking towards me when I did, but thankfully they didn't reach me and they never started running or anything. I was completely spooked. I decided to drive a different way home, and it took longer, but eventually I made it and I didn't see any more clowns. I couldn't stop thinking for the rest of the night about how creepy that was. All those clowns were just slowly walking randomly out of the woods. Was it most likely a bunch of guys trying to scare people as a prank? Yes, probably, but it certainly worked. It takes a lot of dedication to do what they did, and I'm wondering what would have happened if they had caught up to my car, and what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did. This is something that happened just last year. For a little background, I live by myself in a one-bedroom apartment. My building has 4 floors, and the layout is fairly large. There are a couple of different hallways on each floor going in different angles. If it's your first time in the building, it's possible that you could get lost. It's not like a maze or anything, but my basic point is that the building isn't just straight hallways on top of each other. So one night I was out pretty late. I don't really drink much, but I still go out with friends sometimes, and because of this I will often drive them. I don't mind, but I think it was a Friday or a Saturday, so a few of us were out at bars in the city. It was a kind of late night, and after dropping off a couple of friends and getting back to the apartment, it was after 2 a.m. When I parked my car, it was very quiet. My apartment building has a private parking garage that connects to the buildings. There are a couple of them, and there's an outside parking lot as well, but only the residents have access to the garages. And then once you're in the garage, you also need a key to access the elevator or stairs to get into the building. You can walk out of an exit, but you can't go into the building without a key. After parking my car in my spot, the garage was very quiet with it being pretty much the middle of the night. Then I got out of my car and I heard footsteps over near the elevator, which was in the direction that I was going to walk and a good ways away. I assumed it to be another person, until I saw a man looking completely like a clown walk out from behind a car. He was over by the elevator, and then he tried pushing the button for the elevator, but he didn't have a key, so it did nothing. This guy looked kind of like Ronald McDonald. I don't think that's who he was supposed to be, as he more so looked just like a general clown, but it was really creepy, and mind you, this was not near Halloween time. The clown said nothing, and then looked over at me. I was starting to walk over there, but then I just kind of stopped after seeing him, and I was still really far away, like over 100 feet probably. After realizing that he couldn't get into the elevator, the clown then turned and walked past it, disappearing around a corner. I thought, that's really weird. I didn't want to go over there anymore, so instead I walked over to a staircase in the opposite end that I was closer to. I entered there and then walked up the stairs to my floor. Once there, I got to my apartment, went inside, and was going to go to bed. But from being out, I honestly wasn't that tired yet. Sometimes I go out, and when I get home, I'm so tired I go right to sleep. Other times, it's like I'm still a little bit wound up and I need to unwind a little. So I changed and then decided to take out the trash, because I saw that it was full and I knew that I would forget to do it the next day probably. This was maybe 5 to 10 minutes after getting back home. I left my apartment and walked out into the hallway. At the far other end of it, around a corner, was the trash room where you would drop it down a chute. I went down there and dumped the trash, but as I was heading back, I saw the clown again. I had just left the trash room, and I could see down the hallway in the opposite direction of where I was going. This went farther from my apartment, and the hallway went down and to the left. There I saw the clown guy, and he was now in the building, walking down it in my direction. He wasn't looking at me and was still kind of far away, but like a second after I noticed him, I saw him start to look over to me as if he noticed, and then in that split second, I moved away and went back to go to my apartment. I walked really fast because I didn't want to be around this clown guy. I didn't know who he was or how he even got in the building. My instincts were telling me that he did not live here. Thankfully, I was able to make it back to my apartment and I got inside. I didn't bother looking back to see if the clown had followed me, although I didn't hear anything. So I went inside and then I was now going to go to bed. But when entering my bedroom, I heard behind me the sound of someone trying to open my apartment door. I instantly knew that it was the clown. I hoped that he would just walk away. After not hearing anything for a little while, I went over to the door and looked through the peephole. The coast was clear. After that, I was able to go to bed. The following day, I saw the apartment building sent out an email to all the residents. They said that a suspicious person dressed as a clown was seen around the complex and tried to enter multiple units. We were told to call the police if we see him. I'm not sure who he was or what his plan was, and I don't know why he was a clown, but sometime in the night he must have left, and hopefully he doesn't come back. I had some crazy things happen years ago. This took place at a time when I was living by myself and renting this house near where I worked. I don't even live in the same state anymore, but I had to live in this particular city for my job at the time. The city was a little more rural, with a lot more space in general. My house was a one-story home that had a decent-sized front and backyard and was in a quiet neighborhood. I knew that I would be living there for just about a year, so I was fine with renting it. For the most part, living there was a good experience, but one day kind of changed that for a while. It all started one morning. From my memory, as best as I can recall, things had been normal and fine. The previous day I went to work, and the night was a good one, and I remember going to bed at a normal time. As I said, the house that I lived in had just one floor, and my bedroom was at the back corner of it. I would always cover my windows every night, and in the morning I would open the shades of many of them to let in the sunlight. On this morning, after waking up, I uncovered the window that looked out to my backyard. When I did, I instantly got a jump scare, and I literally jumped back probably a foot. There, right on the other side of the window, was what looked like a scary-looking clown man. He wasn't moving, and he was looking right into my window. I almost ran out of the room, but after a few seconds, I noticed that he wasn't moving at all. I kept watching him, and I soon realized there was not a person, but just made to look like one. There was also a large bush right on the other side of the window, so it looked like somebody had taken a shirt and stuffed it, and then stuffed a clown mask as well. They propped it up and threw the bush to be right on the other side of my bedroom window. It was pretty well done to where it looked like a real person at a glance, and after seeing that it was fake, it made me feel slightly better, but not a lot better, because somebody had still put a creepy clown mask right outside my bedroom window in my backyard. This could be someone's idea of a joke, but who? I didn't have any neighbors that I was that friendly with. I mean, I was new to the area kind of, and just living there for a year. Plus, the neighborhood was a bit more spread out, so going into my backyard seemed like a weird thing to do. I went inside and then looked at what it was. Sure enough, it was almost like a scarecrow, as an old shirt had been stuffed with hay, as well as the scary-looking clown mask, and it was propped up to look right into my back bedroom window where I slept at night. I took it inside for evidence. I wasn't really sure what to do. I mean, I wasn't going to call the cops, and I didn't really want to go out and investigate. I just hoped that maybe it was some kids who randomly picked my house as a joke, and that it wouldn't happen again. After that, I just went to work and carried on as normal. But that very same night, after I had got home from work, I heard something outside. It was dark out, and I had already covered all my windows for the night. I was in the living room on my laptop. Things were very quiet in the house. But then, I heard the sound of branches rustling in the backyard by the house. The noises indicated that someone or something was back there. It seemed like either a human or maybe a deer or a larger animal, but human seemed more likely, and I quickly remembered the clown incident from earlier. I carefully went over to a far back window that would give me a view of the area. When I looked, I saw that there was someone there. It was what looked like a larger man who was wearing a clown mask similar to the one that had been put outside my bedroom window. He was prowling around the back, but it was dark so I couldn't see much. I decided to turn on the back light. As soon as I flipped the switch, for a moment I saw him better, but then he turned and quickly ran away. I was glad that he was gone now, but I was also extremely creeped out by the whole thing. After that night, he never came back. I moved a few months after this. I never found out who he was or exactly what he was doing. I used to work a night shift at a small gas station that was in the city next to where I lived. My family knew the owner of the station, so I worked there on and off several times over the years. He would pay me pretty good, and he was a good guy, so I didn't mind. However, I would often work really late night shifts, as the convenience store was open until 2 a.m. At this particular time, this was around 20 years ago, and I was in my early 20s and living with my parents. One night when I was working, it was pretty quiet at the store. By now, it was after midnight, so the roads were mostly empty. Every now and then, a car would come by and get gas. I was by myself, just keeping busy by sweeping the floors and reorganizing the products. Other than the sketchiness of late nights, I actually liked it a lot. It was cool to have the entire place to myself, and it made me feel like I owned the store. From the window behind the counter where I would mostly be, it had a pretty good view of the road that went past the store. The road was, like I said, mostly empty at this hour, but I noticed one car drive by really slowly. I thought that the car would pull into the station because of how slow it was moving, but instead it continued down the road, and I noticed something else about it. The car was being driven by what looked like a clown. It stood out because it was obviously really dark, but this guy had his face painted completely white, so that stood out in the dark, and I remember seeing that he had a red nose as well. Also, he was driving this really tiny car, and he looked to be a taller guy, so it just seemed goofy. It wasn't like an actual clown car, but it was just like a really small vehicle. It slowly drove by, which I found interesting. But about 5 minutes later, he drove by again, going the opposite way. Overall, I didn't think much of it, but the clown would continue to then slowly drive back and forth about 5 more times over the next hour. I just kept seeing him coming back and forth down the street. I noticed him looking over at the store as well. I wasn't really sure as to what he was doing, but I found it to be pretty odd, and there wasn't much else going on at all. But the clown never did drive into the gas station. Eventually, I was off for the night. I finished up a few things and then locked the store and left. I got out to my car and then drove back home to my parents' house. This was about 10 minutes away in our neighborhood. By the time I got home, obviously everyone else was asleep. I entered the house, and not long after, I heard the sound of a car driving down our street. The street was normally very quiet, which is why I noticed it. I went over and looked out of a window to see that same clown in his car. Now I was freaked out. What was he doing here? I watched him slowly drive by. I stayed at the window. A short time later, he drove by again. I did not know why I kept seeing him. I didn't see him for a while, so I moved away from the window. I don't remember what exactly I did at this point, but I remember a while later I was back. I went to go to the window before going to bed, just to make sure that the clown was not driving by again. However, I noticed his car was now parked on the side of the road across the street, and the clown did not appear to be in it. Where could he be? I was now really nervous, wondering if he was in our yard someplace. I went to a bunch of different windows and looked out them. I didn't see the clown, but there wasn't great lighting back there at this hour. I remember at that point I wasn't really that tired yet, and I was always kind of a night owl, so instead of going to bed, I wasn't really planning on going to sleep anymore. Instead, I went into my bedroom and started playing video games until I would get tired. About 20 minutes or so into this, there was then a knock at our front door. I instantly knew that it was probably the clown. I got up and then went downstairs and looked out of a window. Sure enough, he was there. He did not knock again, though. Instead, he just stood there for a while. Then he turned around and slowly walked back to his car and drove off into the night. After that, I never saw him or his car again. I was looking out for him at work and at home for the next few weeks, but I didn't see him. To this day, I still wonder about that.